Hello, guys. I just wanted to update you. Due to some technical difficulties, this week my audio is garbage. But we will fix it by the time we record next week. So I hope everyone will enjoy their New Year's celebrations and enjoy this show as well. And we're live. Welcome back, guys, to another episode of the Solvable Mysteries podcast. And happy holidays to everyone else. I hope everyone's enjoying their holidays. I'm joined by Glenn Heikov. Dude, how's your holidays? And are you excited for this week's episode?
Ooh, well, the holidays have been busy. We already talked about how it seems like when it rains, it pours. And it's literally was just raining here and pouring. But yeah, just having one of those weeks where between the holidays coming up and trying to get stuff ready, we're cooking our brisket today on the smoker, all kinds of stuff's going on. But yeah, I'm really glad that it is the holidays. And I'm really interested in talking about this case today because this is like another one that is like a super famous one from the 80s that really shaped how we think about stranger danger. Like it's almost like one of those things that caused a phenomena and then everybody forgot about, well, kind of everybody forgot about what caused the phenomenon in the first place.
Exactly. This is an interesting case because I didn't really know or was aware that maybe being a paper boy back in the 80s was a dangerous thing, especially like in like middle America, like Iowa. We're going to be talking today about the Johnny Gosch disappearance. And without any further ado, I think let's just jump into the case. And after we talk about the case, the timeline, then we can jump to the details and our own thoughts. Because this case is a pretty big case. I'm pretty sure some of the people in our audience already is aware about the case. And I feel like we already actually mentioned that this case. This case was mentioned by some of our commenters on the YouTube channel. So, without any further ado, I just want to quickly read the profile that I have on Johnny Gosch. So, Johnny Gosch, as you can see from the images, if you're watching this on the YouTube channel, he was a paper boy. He was 12 years of age at the time of his disappearance. He was from a small town in Iowa called Des Moines, West Des Moines. He disappeared without a trace between 6 and 7 a.m. on September 5th, 1982. So this is an old case. Um, he is presumed to have been kidnapped, and there are multiple suspects in this case, etc., etc. As of 2021, there have been no arrests made, and the case is now considered cold, but it still remains open. So apparently, it's still an open investigation. Eyewitnesses said he was forced into a blue car that quickly left the area, but another eyewitness stated that there was a strange man walking behind him soon before he disappeared, and another eyewitness said that he saw a silver vehicle um, oddly driving next to him as he disappeared. So I will talk about all of these very soon. The only thing authorities found the day when Johnny disappeared was his wagon filled with undelivered papers because he was carrying the papers that he would distribute through the neighborhood in his little red wagon. The other distinctive features of Johnny was that he was a little bit taller than kids his age, and he was 12 years of age. I also want to read a little bit of his description. As I've said, at the time when he disappeared, he was 12. He was born on November 12th, 1969. He was a male. He was white. He had light brown hair. His eye colors were blue. He weighed around 140 pounds at the time when he disappeared. He had uh, features that would distinguish him from other kids, such as a birthmark on the left cheek, a horseshoe shaped scar on his tongue as well. And that's pretty much all we have. Um, Also, apparently, there are dental information that is also available, and the DNA. His family has provided a sample of DNA, and tests were completed, but his location or whereabouts have never been heard from before. And I have a more in depth timeline of Johnny's disappearance. But before we jump into the timeline, dude, anything you want to add to his general profile, or maybe the local area, or just the time, uh, the decade, the 80s, when, this happened?
Yeah, I mean, so it's a good question. He's coming in. He's a little bit older than me. He's a few years older than me. So he was kind of like what, kind of half a, I don't know if I want to say generation or something, but like he would have been older than me in school. But it is interesting because it's sort of some of the experiences are the same. I do have to admit I had to look up how to say the name of the city, because it's one of those city names I didn't I don't say a lot on this side of the country. And even though like so it's Des Moines, I
Oh,
think is the way.
I
Uh,
completely
yeah,
butchered
no,
it.
but me too, because I look at it and it's even, what the funny part is, it's like I think it's like a French name that's been kind of like changed with like American pronunciation. So the way the French pronounce it is like different than how Americans pronounce, kind of in a weird French way, the name of this town. So yeah, it's already, it's interesting because you and I were talking about this earlier. Um, it seems like what he was doing was a pretty all American thing, right? Like young entrepreneur, or at least someone working. I don't know if he's not an entrepreneur. He's I guess a free agent or something for the newspaper as a like a contractor doing that job. But it's interesting to think that like that's like maybe even now I think a job that people still do in some places. I mean, newspapers are not what they were a long time ago, but it's interesting to think that he was out there like I'll say just from the intro, even the pictures of him, it's interesting to see that like this is a transitional age for this kid, because like in that one picture of him, he still kind of looks like a little kid. But I've seen pictures of him in like what looks like taekwondo gi, like a karate school outfit, where he looked a little bit older. You know what I mean? So probably over that year, he was. Some of these pictures seem to make him look a little bit older than he does in this particular one.
No, that's a good point. I've seen him in some sort of a picture where he was on top of a motorcycle, and he looked like he was like a high school senior. You know what I mean? Like driving to the prom or
Was
something.
he on like maybe a dirt bike or something like that?
I feel like so. I feel like so. I'm definitely gonna fetch that image in the post production, but I don't have it on me right now.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. So let me jump to the timeline, man, because the timeline is kind of interesting, but it's very like I want to make sure I do this right. So I'm gonna definitely begin with the timeline. So um, the timeline begins on September. Well, I'm not really sure. September 4th, 1982. The only thing I know about September 4th, the day before Johnny disappeared, was the fact that apparently the whole family was having dinner, and apparently, Johnny decided to go to bed early because he said that he had to wake up early the next morning to do his paper boy job. You know what I mean? And he was Johnny was very, how should I put it, responsible when it came to his job. He was doing this job for 11 months, and not a single day he took off. You know what I mean? He never took a day off. He was always there doing the job, and even received awards from the local newspaper for his like really good service as being the local paper boy. So I'll begin the timeline stating that Johnny Gosch was 12 when he disappeared. He disappeared as he was on his delivery route in early morning hours of September 5th, 1982. This was the Sunday, uh, also Labor Day weekend. He was accompanied on his paperboy trip by his dachshund puppy Gretchen. He left his home just after 5:50 a.m. in the morning on September 5th, cut through the neighbor's yard and walked 2 blocks east to pick up his newspapers from the paper drop at the corner of 42nd Street and Ashworth Road. So, on the map, because I think the map is very valuable for people who are trying to understand more about Johnny's disappearance, we can see that this is Johnny's home right here, this building right here. And he would, I believe, cut through these neighborhood lawns somehow. And he would go to the newspaper drop along this area right here. So this was actually back in 82, a newspaper drop location where newspaper boys would come together and they would pick up their newspapers that they would distribute across the neighborhood. Now, Johnny had to pick up 37 newspapers. That would mean that he had to distribute them to 37 households. I believe Johnny was distributing the newspapers in this general block right here, because one of the places that he would end up distributing for is the Francrest Circle, which is just some cul-de-sac. And the story continues from there. Um, as he approached the corner, he was actually stopped by a man. So, as he was approaching the newspaper drop location, he was stopped by a man sitting in a late model two-tone blue car next to the paper drop. This man driving this blue vehicle had been parked there for around 20 minutes at that particular point, which is kind of strange because it's 5:50 a.m., 6 a.m., and you're already parked at some newspaper drop at 6 a.m. on a Sunday. Labor Day weekend kind of seems a little suspicious. And he stopped Johnny and he asked him about how to get to 86th Street in Des Moines. So this is the 86th Street. Now it has changed to the 22nd Street or whatever. So essentially, Johnny was asked at this newspaper drop by this suspicious man how to get to this location right here, right? And Johnny gave him the directions, and the man made a U turn onto Ashford Road and drove off. I don't know into which direction on Ashford Road the man drove off, because if he would have driven eastwards, he would be approaching the location that he wanted to get to. But if he was driving westward, he would be driving into completely opposite direction of like from where he actually wanted to go to. So I don't really know exactly where the man drove, but what he did was pretty interesting because a few minutes later, as Johnny was, I think now, at the newspaper drop, and he was chatting with his friend Mike, who was also a newspaper boy, the same man from the blue vehicle passed by again, and now he collectively asked all of the newspaper boys at the newspaper drop location how to get to that 86th Street. And now, after trying to again give directions to this strange man, Johnny approached his neighbor, an adult neighbor, John Rossi, who was there picking up newspaper bundles for his 3 sons. And Johnny asked this neighbor, "Can you help? This man wants to know where 86th Street is." And then Rossi went up to the man in the blue car, and Johnny returned to talk to his friend Mike. And then after a while, John Rossi said that this man in the blue vehicle was really weird and that he almost seemed like the guy was high. And in the newspaper, for the local newspaper, this John Rossi guy a year later said that it even seemed like this dude was not drunk, but he was high on drugs potentially because he didn't seem drunk. And then what the man in the blue car did, he apparently drove off into the eastward direction, but he turned on the 39th Street and drove northward. So that's not really where he was supposed to go. He was supposed to go drive at least what, 6 blocks in the eastward direction, but he didn't make it. He actually decided to turn northward way sooner than he was supposed to turn northward. And this is kind of interesting for us because he turned like not that far away from where Johnny later disappears, but more on that later. I would like to stop here for a while and ask your take on uh the whole timeline so far. Is this even understandable what I'm trying to say so far?
No, this is excellent. I mean, I was having, I mean, just imagine I spent, several hours of research. I mean, both of us have, respectively done our own research on this for hours. And just, there's so many details to this thing. I never really understood kind of the lay of the land. So I think this really helps to kind of explain what goes on. It also, it just, it's just easier to wrap your head around because I always wonder with someone like a paper delivery person, I guess might be the politically correct term now, paper person. Like what does it entail? So like that doesn't sound so unreasonable, right? Like 5 in the morning, you get up, you're Johnny, you pick up 37 newspapers, you hit 37 different houses, and then you get on with your day and you make some bucks at the end of your week. I could see why this is a viable, like little source, little job, or maybe one of the first jobs for a teenager. Now, what I do have to wonder is the address that you showed that this guy was supposedly looking for, which probably was just a ruse, right? Because when I look at it, it's like in the middle of a residential neighborhood, right? But this is like 5 in the morning, 6 in the morning, maybe
Yeah,
somewhere around then. I mean, where could he be going? There's nowhere. I mean, it would be one thing if that's like where I live. Sometimes streets like that, they kind of stop and start again across the valley or across the city. So like something that like where your little place marker is that he was supposedly looking for. Some places like that street then becomes, I mean, people can get lost and have a hard time finding stuff because streets will stop and start in weird places. And like in the old days, like when this happened, of course, there's no Google Maps, there's no Yahoo Maps, there's none of the no MapQuest, none of the stuff that they used to have, or, with the internet. What people did often have, if they didn't have like um, a map just for the city, which they might very well have, is they had something called a Thomas Map Guide. If you've heard of that.
of
So, but
course.
anyways, it's
From
kind of
the
hard to use. Yeah.
Yeah, we talked about that on the Yuba County 5 episode, if you remember.
Yep.
Yeah. All
That's
right.
right.
Yeah. Let me continue on because this is definitely not the only strange person in this case. So okay. So the man drives off, and apparently we don't really see or hear anything else from the blue man, from the man in the blue car ever again. Honestly, that's the last time we ever heard of him. But then the new people will emerge as very suspicious very soon in this timeline. So okay. So uh, that was what happened. He drove off, right? Now, um, let me see. Okay, 1 second. Okay, one other thing I forgot. Okay, I'm sorry, but I forgot the one very important thing that this man did as he drove off. He, out of nowhere, flickered his headlights 3 times and then drove off. So some people now suspect that maybe the flickering of the lights 3 times maybe means that he was alerting someone of like potential victims, you know? Like what do you think of that? Like flickering your headlights 3 times and driving off? That makes no sense.
Do you guys have? I was wondering. Do you have? So like signals with headlights. There's like your brights are on signal, right? The double tap
Oh
with
yeah.
the high
Yes.
beams. Okay, so there's that. Tell me if you know this one. This one I actually it's like an old timey one from like the old days of cars, but they still do it some places. Have you ever gotten the one where if there's like a cop or a state trooper or something waiting waiting to give you a speeding ticket, the person coming the other way who already saw it will like signal you
Oh yes,
that
we
there's
have that.
yeah, yeah, that one that we kind of discovered accidentally as a teen. Someone did that, and I was like, oh wow, we were like, why is he flashing his lights? And then we're like, oh, because there's a cop right there. And then we didn't go. Okay, so I was just curious as far as how international some of those headlight.
Yeah. Oh, dude, I think I lost you for a second.
Sorry, yeah, I just audio for a second. Yeah, so that's one of the things that I always think of with like the headlight signaling. So for me, what I thought about that was, I mean, I feel like people are going to know that that's where the paper drop happens, and that's where the paper boys are. What I wonder is if they because as we're going to go on, there's allegations that, let's say, Johnny was targeted specifically, maybe um, for any number of different reasons. Then in that case, maybe they're saying, hey, this is the kid, like confirming, what I mean, the kid's here. And then that if that guy's the spotter, then like anyone else in like a team or a conspiracy, let's say, to kidnap someone like Johnny, would then that's like step one, is like, is Johnny working today?
Yeah, exactly. No, that's a good point. And actually, speaking of a potential team, very shortly after this, Johnny picked up his newspapers, put them in his little red wagon, and he proceeded to walk northward on the 42nd Street to distribute the newspapers in his local residential area in the neighborhood, right? And so if you would look at the map, man, so the blue car drives off eastwards. Johnny walks northward. And as Johnny is around this location right here, or something like that, another 15-year-old newspaper boy saw a tall man walk out from the shadows between two houses and walked toward Johnny from behind as he approached the corner at Murcourt Lane. So this is Murcourt Lane, and around this area. So as Johnny was approaching this corner, a mystery man walks out from the shadows in this direction. Now, this 15-year-old boy, who was the witness of this strange man, didn't really tell anything else. So that's all we have. Now, Johnny eventually reached the end of this block on at the corner of Marquardt Lane right here. And he parked his wagon on the corner. He usually left his wagon in this area while delivering the newspapers to Francrest Circle, which is this circle right here. So apparently he would leave his wagon here, get like some newspapers. I think he would go and deliver them to this neighborhood right here, right? Now, a neighbor watched from his window as a silver Ford Fairmont rolled up and parked at the corner, but due to where his house was situated, he was unable to see Johnny behind the car. So I don't really know which exact house it was. It could have been any house. But Johnny stops here with his little wagon filled with newspapers, and a silver vehicle drives up to him, blocks, and the only witness who saw him, his eyesight, or how should I put it, like viewpoint, was blocked by the car. So he couldn't really see what Johnny was doing then because he was blocked by the car. Like his vision was blocked by the car. Then he apparently looked around somewhere in his home, stopped watching the situation because apparently it didn't seem that suspicious at that point. But then he heard a loud car door slam, and then he decided to look back again through the window because it seemed kind of strange. It was very early in the morning. He looked outside again, and then he saw the silver car drive off. I believe the car drove off into the northern direction, but Johnny was nowhere to be seen. Just his red wagon filled with newspapers was there. So this person in the silver Ford vehicle is apparently, in my opinion, the biggest suspect because, like, what do you think, man? Like, this seems like Johnny was actually abducted in this silver vehicle, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's what everyone points to as the main, the sort of the official story.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so I just want to quickly finish up the story because, like, we don't really have that much anymore, right? So, um, as I've said, the neighbor sees this, but then I don't know, goes and does his business or whatever. Johnny is not on the street anymore. Nobody really realized that Johnny was missing until about 7:45 a.m. in the morning when a neighbor called Johnny's father, John, and asked where his newspaper was. And now John Gosch immediately thought that this was strange because Johnny was a very responsible newspaper boy, like a really responsible carrier. So he first assumed that maybe Johnny slept in and forgot to wake up. So he immediately went to his room to investigate, and he didn't see Johnny there. And then later on, he discovered that the family dog, the dachshund, had already returned, but without Johnny. So the father actually went to investigate outside, and pretty soon he found Johnny's red wagon filled with newspapers. And what he did, he distributed the newspapers on his own because at that point he didn't really think that it was super strange. He was thinking that it was strange, but he didn't call the cops by then. Um, After looking for a little while in the neighborhood, he realized that Johnny was nowhere to be seen. And at 8:30 a.m. in the morning, John Gosch called the police and reported his son missing. The only thing I want to mention here before I throw it back to you, man, is the fact that this was in fact the very first time that Johnny Gosch was set out to deliver newspapers on his own. Every single time before this, he would deliver them with his father John Gosch. That's why John Gosch was like had the know-how how to deliver and where to deliver the newspapers. But this was the very first time when Johnny was delivering on his own, and yeah, at 8:30, he called the cops, and yep, that's where we leave the timeline at.
You know, that very first time on his own thing, wasn't that also the case with? I mean, I'm having to rewind my memory a lot. Wasn't that also the case with Eden Pats, where they were like, "Oh, you're gonna walk to the bus for the first time," and it was supposed to be like a big deal.
Yeah, and not even that. I think so, but also for Eugene Martin, a paper boy who disappeared 2 years later from the same town that we're gonna still talk about on the show later on. So, um, yeah, just a lot of coincidences. It's good that you mentioned Ethan Pats. I forgot. Yeah, Ethan Pats. I believe it was the first time he was going to his bus stop for school, right?
That's right, and I only mentioned them because like you and I were saying before, this was a this case and the Eden Pat's case, as we'll see about Johnny's mother Noreen and his father to some extent as well. Given some of the media footage I saw from the era, they both pushed pretty hard for a lot of different things, including legislation and things like the milk carton pictures, which we covered all the way back in the Pat's episode. But I think we'll just mention it here that this is. I mean, I grew up. I was not old enough to notice any difference in milk cartons probably in 1982 because I was still a pretty young kid. But I definitely remember the pictures on the milk cartons. I remember them being maybe like different dimensions, probably depending on the manufacturer, the milk, etc. But yeah, it does really take me back. Um, I guess the other thing that is weird is, does the timing strike you? I mean, just as initial thoughts, does the timing strike you as weird that this is like the very first time he's going to be on his own? I think, in fact, I don't know if you ran into this in the literature, but apparently what happened was Johnny's mom
Yeah.
started getting a bunch of calls from around the neighborhood because like the papers had never been late before, and now the papers are late, and everyone's like, "What's going on?"
Yeah, exactly. No, yeah, that's the point. He was a really responsible carrier, you know. So no, you have a good point.
Yeah. So I mean, from there, so I guess the other question is, so when his father calls the police, what happens then? What's sort of did they take it seriously?
Yeah, that's the crazy part because I'm sure you're aware of Noreen Gosch, the mother, right? This is Noreen Gosch. She has been very heavily critical of the police work over the years, and she thinks that the investigation was conducted unprofessionally, and that apparently, even before the police arrived to the scene, she already knew about the blue vehicle, about the strange man emerging from the shadows, about the silver vehicle, etc., etc. So I don't really know. The only things that I know about the police in this case is that I've seen some news coverage from like the, I believe, 80s or like 90s, like maybe 10 years after the fact. And the police did seem like they weren't inclined to talk to the press all that much, but they did kind of indicate to me that they had like some sort of a falling out with the mother. So I really can't say. I don't know exactly what happened after. The father called.
It's hard to be from what I've seen on Reddit and some of these. I mean, this case is so talked about. There's a lot of well, there's a lot of discussion on Reddit about a lot of things, but apparently there's sort of like this changing narrative about this case, unfortunately, because it's been talked so much that I think even some of the key people involved have sort of revised their stories, or maybe like as the story keeps getting told, there seems to be new details that come out, and you don't always know, what I mean, if those are really true details or whether people are doing what natural human beings do, is memories change over time. um, so that's one thing I think is going to be a little bit of a theme today, in terms of looking at how the everything washes out with this. I will say that just idly thinking, I was thinking about it, and I was like, gosh, of all people, of all kids, if you were a police department in like a relatively like a medium sized city, I guess like Des Moines. I mean, on one hand, yeah, you must have teenagers going missing all the time that are like runaways, kids fighting with their parents, kids that just want to just go out on their own. But you got to figure a paper boy, paper person, paper deliverer, whoever the term is. You figure that person is sort of like you figure that they would be a higher priority kid to look for because they're driving around on their bike or whatever in the dark, when people can't see very well, so they're at a higher risk to maybe get hit by a car. And it also seems like the kind of responsible kid that you wouldn't think would be a runaway. You know what I mean? Like that doesn't sound like a kid that's trying to run away from it all. That sounds like a kid that's taking on more responsibility.
Yeah. No, that's actually a really good point. And if I was the law enforcement and I heard that a newspaper carrier, I believe the official term is, um, who was very responsible, even received awards about not missing a day's work, as well as always delivering everything on time. Now, all of a sudden, leaves his wagon filled with newspapers in the middle of the street and is nowhere to be seen. I mean, I would probably investigate this pretty heavily because I think the narrative back in the day was that apparently a lot of kids ran away from their homes, if you know what I mean. But this didn't seem like a runaway type of a situation. This seemed like a boy who went to do his job in the morning and was ran into devious individuals.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And I guess that maybe this is a genesis of the source of frustration between, let's say, on one hand, Johnny's parents, and then the police department on the other, where the police department's like, look, we've got all these different minors, these kids, these teenagers that go missing every year, and a lot of them, some percentage of them are found. A lot of times it's the same old story, domestic incidents. So they're probably like jaded to kind of the many family events that they run into every day. But then, for someone like where that's sort of a more alien world to them right now, where everything's going fine with the kid, the kid's being responsible and has never been late and never run off and never done anything weird. I think I'm actually more confused about why the father wasn't more worried, if
Yeah.
given the initial description. You know what I mean?
No, that's actually a really good point because as I was investigating this case on my own, I found it pretty strange that the father went and delivered the newspapers before calling the cops. But then I was thinking to myself, maybe he assumed that maybe he ran off to play with some kids in the neighborhood. I mean, there were a lot of newspapers there, so I was kind of thinking to myself, maybe that kind of makes sense. Maybe you don't immediately jump to conclusions. Maybe you know.
Yeah, I mean, they could be. I mean, at the end of the day, we are talking about a 13-year-old or 12-year-old, right? 12 year
Yeah.
old um, boy who, like, 12-year-old boys do a lot of impulsive things, right? So that doesn't this isn't the first time that a 12-year-old boy goes from like perfectly uh respectable reputation and always listened to that. That's actually right around the exact age that kids start pushing, that boys, I would say specifically, start pushing back as teenagers on their parents and other authority figures.
No, that's really good. That's a good point because it would be the case, but then from what I've gathered, there wasn't any notion that Johnny was unhappy with his personal life, etc., etc. So now that we have the timeline out of the way, I know that there's a bunch of stuff that the that you looked into, right, in respect to Johnny's mother's, Noreen's, claims, and her claims are sometimes pretty difficult to uh, believe in. So I think it would be probably a good time for us to jump into the mother's claims, the sensational claims that she has made over the years, and then we'll take it from there. So I don't know, man. You want to jump into that?
Yeah, so she's an interesting character, Noreen Gosh, because when this whole thing started, she was very, very good about getting out in front of the press, and I think really becoming an activist on behalf of her missing son. And I mean, it's really hard to not respect that. I think where things start to get a little problematic, and I think now that we're kind of in the casual conversation phase of things, where I'll start to kind of
Yeah.
and unveil some things that happened, and then go into some bigger detail about, we can kind of talk about impression about it. There's a lot of footage of her, so it was almost hard to research her because there's like a couple of these. I mean, one of these things is like a sit down interview. It seems like she would just kind of sit down with almost anybody, which maybe is a good thing when you're looking for a missing family member. Um, what I think it got a little weird was that over the years, there's a sense, and that's what I'm going to kind of lay out here. There's a sense of like her getting frustrated with the tempo and the lack of interest in her specific case, and then all of a sudden something really interesting would happen, and then the spotlight would be back, and then maybe things would die down, and then meanwhile she's been vocal this entire time and making appearances, and we have kind of a chance almost to watch somebody age in front of our eyes as we see these different snapshots of her over the past, what, 30 years or so, um more, trying to find out about what happened to Johnny. So, okay, here's the first thing is, right after this happened, of course, this is a famous case. It's getting a lot of attention. Um, they get a lot of like crank calls. They're getting a lot of tips and things from people that, don't necessarily know anything. I will say before I get into one of these people that was like a weird one who did seem to know something about it. I know you mentioned something about some phone calls in the research notes, and I actually couldn't find specifically what you might have been referring to. So I was wondering if you were just referring
Yeah.
to, yeah.
Really quickly about the phone calls. Yeah, that's a good point. I don't have this right now, but I'm sure I'll add it in the post production. I was watching like a TV show from like back in 2010, and they were doing a segment on like missing children from like the 80s or something like that. And on there, um, they kind of just were showing random stuff, like random little details on the infographic, and one of the things that they showed was that apparently Noreen Gosch, she claims that Johnny called her. I'm not really sure. I think it was like 2 years after the fact on 1984, called her 3 times. Um, so yeah, but then I actually looked into it myself. I couldn't find any other information than that. But
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure she did claim this. If it was on TV, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it's buried in one of these appearances because there's a couple of really notable appearances. One I think is from like the early 2000s or something, when she was, with this other person that she was, claiming knew a lot about her case. But before that, there was like a Stranger Danger production that this one town did, where they're interviewing the parents. Johnny, sorry, the father and Noreen, and they're they're kind of laying out the case and laying out what happened and giving a lot of different information about missing children. Now, what I found was interesting is when you actually research missing children, seems like even that's controversial about like what figures and statistics are real and what have been sort of like been almost bro science statistics from like the 70s or 80s that never got corrected, because there's a lot of those out there as well. So it gets weird when you talk about this topic. There's not necessarily a lot of really definitive info about, let's say, child trafficking and prostitution with teenagers and things like that in the United States. It gets very very murky. But okay, that being said, let me lay out what I did here, or what I did run into here. So one of the things that was interesting was at some point in actually June 1984, a man who went by the name of Sam Soda contacts Noreen to arrange a meeting, and he says that he's a private investigator, and he sort of injects himself into the case. He says he wants to donate his time and talents to search for Johnny. And then what's really weird is, and I don't really understand how somebody could claim to have a good knowledge of this topic. So the topic we're going to talk about is, I got to be careful how we talk about, you know what I mean? Because YouTube flag stuff.
Yeah.
So, we're talking about, let's say, underage people being used for purposes of like prostitution and, pornography and things like that. Um, this guy, Sam Soda, supposedly is deep, deep undercover in this world and knows about all these secret meetings that these people have, um, knows about these like networks of people. And in fact, supposedly had gotten this one guy who I think was working for one of these newspapers, I think with the delivery boys, had gotten him to like admit to molesting some amount of them and got the guy fired from his job. It's really weird. I guess what's strange is, one of the most sensational claims is that he knew that another boy was going to be kidnapped, and then he says that Noreen says that this guy told her this, and she tried to tip off the cops that this guy was tipping her off that another paper boy was going to get kidnapped, and she says that everybody blew her off, except for this one reporter at the Des Moines Register. And then, yeah, as a Paperboys does it actually, Eugene Martin, like you said, goes missing, and all of a sudden it's like, well, gosh, what's going on here? Um, how could this guy have known? Now, here's the thing: for all that's like a really interesting clue, right? You would want to know more. I don't
Yeah.
know what it was, but I could not find the rest of that story about this Sam Soda guy. Like, there's even one of the drawings in our notes here. I have a link where the person writing about the Sam Soda character has like this compilation of like suspect draw. He's comparing like a suspect drawing. He kind of pushes it all into one document, so it's a little bit confusing when you look at the picture. It looks like it was an official picture that had all these things in it. No, it
Right.
was like, you know what I mean? But it's interesting because the Sam Soda guy actually kind of looks like one of the suspect descriptions for the guy that grabbed Johnny,
Oh
depending on
yeah.
which one you look at. So if you click on that link right there, um,
Uh,
let's see
on
right here.
on your script, right?
Yeah, my
On
script right under precursor. I've got it
okay. Yeah.
highlight. There it
Yeah,
is.
it's
Got
medium.
that one.
Oh yeah, perfect. Okay,
Yep.
yeah, 1 second, dude. I'm gonna
Yeah,
bring it in.
just go ahead and take a look at this. I thought this was interesting. Like, this is all, you know. By the way, full disclosure, we're just doing our entertainment show, right? We're not saying this guy did anything. We're saying that this Sam Soda guy, that was supposed to be his photo, and that one drawing there
Oh.
could potentially look like him. No, I don't know. No, I'll say once again, I disclaimer, I don't know how much the
Hmm.
one in the lower right hand corner has been altered by anybody else.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Because somebody could easily take the top suspect description and make changes to it, right?
Hmm.
And then kind of photocopy, you know, like degrade it a little bit to
Hmm.
make it look like it's one of the official composites.
Can
But
I
I
step?
thought,
Yeah.
yeah.
Feel sorry. I just want to really quickly step in to give some more light on the actual, suspect. This image right here. This is the sketch of the man driving the blue vehicle. Okay, so let's remember, we have three suspects. We have the man in the blue vehicle, who seemed drunk. We have the strange man appearing out of the shadows and following Johnny. And then we have the man driving the silver vehicle. Another interesting fact about that silver vehicle, we don't really know if it's a man or a woman. We just assume it's a man because the driver has never been actually witnessed by anyone, just his car or her car. So, but this particular sketch is of that man in the blue vehicle. So that's all I wanted to add.
So I mean, the whole thing is interesting. I could not find for all these different articles and different things I looked at on the case. Maybe this is a flaw in my researching. So if anybody, you know, when we put this episode out, if someone knows more, and it seems like a lot of people have been following this case for a long time and have a lot of strong opinions, I'd like to hear more about Sam Soda. But I couldn't. I ran into a little bit of a dead end there, so that was a little bit frustrating. Um, but it was weird. I was thinking, how would this guy know back in the 80s about all these different circles? It wasn't like now where if you were like some kind of I guess if you were on a quest to like try to find out more about different groups of people, you could maybe go on the internet and try to infiltrate them. And that's what happens all the time, right? Cops go on the internet and they're kind of easily able to find these networks of people or try to sneak in and pretend to be somebody they aren't so they can go undercover. I don't know how you did that other than pretending to be one of those people and then meeting those other people in person back then when the only way people were communicating was via either telephone, letters, or in person. Like there wasn't really at all any kind of internet that normal human beings would use back then, especially your run of the mill, I guess, pervert to try to figure out a way to say it. So that's odd to me, and that kind of makes me really wonder about this character. Like, who is he? Is he even a? Is he one of the people he's professing to? Um, is he sort of like playing both sides, like Whitey Bulger, you know? Um, in the gangster land? Is he doing that in those circles, or is he completely full of it and just happened to have gotten a lucky guess that something was going to happen to another kid? Um, and is this somebody helping spread a moral panic? And does this kind of input affect Noreen's state of mind later on in her life when she starts making other appearances and coming up with like other, let's say, stories and theories and has these really deeply held beliefs about these things?
Yeah, really quickly, dude. I want to give you a break and step in. So, yeah, apparently this guy, 2 months before it happened, predicted the disappearance of Eugene Martin. another paperboy, right? And I want to quickly jump to the map to give you a break and then also shed some light for everyone who's watching this on on the channel, because Eugene, right? Eugene disappeared from this location right here. Apparently, there was a mystery man witnessed in this location as well. So it's Des Moines. It's still in the same town, but it's pretty much on the other side of Des Moines. So it's not in the same neighborhood, right? So we can't really say that it all happened like right there. But then also, like, if this guy did get it right, I kind of feel very suspicious in respect to the claims that um, Sam Soda got it right. Maybe because I mean, if he did just miraculously know the exact time when another paperboy would be kidnapped, and he only told Noreen, I feel like that would make Noreen's brain like haywire a little bit, you know?
Yeah, it's. I mean, it's. I didn't even. I think you put it even better just now, and more simply. Why would he just tell Noreen? Like she's not the Clearly, she's not the locus of power in Des Moines, right? I mean, her kid's not back. She says no one's listening to her. So why would this guy of all people? You know what I mean? I mean, God chose Moses. Why would this guy choose Noreen to be
Yeah.
the mess? Okay, so that's definitely odd to me. Okay, so there's that's weird. And then once again, like for him to even know, given what I already outlined about the differences in technology and how people communicated back in the early '80s, it almost makes me sound like he was an accomplice. Even if he was an accomplice ratting on his conspirators, it still sounds like he was part of the plan to even know. Because how would you know? I mean, if, suppose because this is going to come up, by the way. There's going to be like these associations of like things like Nambla, which is like the guys that like little boys and stuff like that. These weird groups of people, and I was like, I don't think they talk. I don't know. I mean, maybe they do, but you would think that they would be smart enough not to talk about things like that at their meetings, right? Like, let's go, about kidnapping minors, because you got to figure for any kind of organization like that, or the Ku Klux Klan, any kind of organization that has like either an insidious motive or a lot of very focused law enforcement attention on it, you got to figure there's tons of like undercover officers there, right? I mean, that was the big joke about the Ku Klux Klan in the South during the '60s, when the FBI started cracking down, was that you had more people working for the FBI and the Klan than actual just Klan members that were, not that were actually there under their own auspices or their own intent. So yeah, that being said, that whole thing just it seems weird, but I'm gonna before I just end this little soapbox sermon about this, I will say that given stuff in the recent news about Ghislaine Maxwell and Epstein, and then when you start looking into like all the weirdness around that kind of stuff, it does, and the famous people involved, that are taking plane trips with this guy that no matter what political side you're on, because all political candidates are wrapped up in this weird scandal that sort of the press still dances around. That thing would sort of imply that it was part of the same animal as what we're talking about today, right? Because we're at the end of the day, we're talking about people who are under 18 who may or may not be getting transported against their will, and being put to uses, immoral uses, definitely against their will, and their ability to, let's say, sign themselves up for it.
Nah,
Um,
that's
oh,
perfectly put, man. Perfectly put. Yeah. No, I just want to say step in, dude. Amazing job on the Sam Soda character. I didn't know any of this information during my research. Very happy you covered it. So yeah, that's all I want to say.
so then the other thing that happened. So this was one thing that happened. Okay, so that was first. This is like one of these first blips in the radar where it gets interesting. Let's say.
Oh
And I
yeah.
have to be careful because I really don't want to come off as the bad guy. Um, I don't want to be attacking Johnny's mother. I will say that when I played the footage, the consensus in my household was that she came off less and less credible, especially the more recent the footage got. Now here's a case in point. Now, okay, said Johnny's been kidnapped. Law enforcement fears that maybe he's been killed right away, like is what happened to some of the similar victims of this kind of like abduction.
Yeah.
With the, especially for a specific demographic, right? Because there does always seem like there's sort of a different reason for why people kidnap, you know, people for. I do wonder. One thing I do wonder before we move on is I'm still trying to get in my head how somebody would do it if it was just one man, because Johnny, like we said, looked like he was in pretty good shape. He's getting bigger. He's almost, I would say, Johnny's almost to the size where he's dangerous. You know what I mean? I mean, obviously, kids can always be dangerous, but he's almost getting to like man-sized dangerousness. You know what I mean? Where the amount of athleticism means that he could potentially defend himself in a way that might be lethal to the person that he defends himself
Again.
against. If that makes sense, you know
No,
what I mean?
makes sense. I really, yeah,
Yeah.
yes. Do I want to give you like a quick breather as well? Really quickly want to step in. You make a really good point, because if you really would think about it, all of the suspects, they could potentially have formed a team to kidnap Johnny Gosch, and the first man maybe was scoping out the area for looking at the paper drop and scoping out who was alone and who was the best potential victims, and Johnny was 12. So there were other paper boys who were older than him and some other parents as well. So maybe, the man in the blue car just noticed that this boy was like probably the youngest one or one of the youngest ones, and he was alone. So he drove here. He drove past the newspaper drop twice to make sure that he doesn't seem even better victims potentially. Then, as he decides on the victim, he flashes his headlights 3 times, drives away. Then he pulls up here. He notably pulls into the street where he wasn't supposed to go to, according to where he asked everyone that he wanted to get to, right? If that makes any sense. Now, the other man that walked, the mystery man that emerged from the shadows and was apparently following Johnny, he could have potentially helped out the man in the silver car get Johnny in the car, because now at this point it would be like two people's operation, and they would just drive away. So that mystery man, tall mystery man, was apparently maybe strong. Maybe that was his role maybe this wasn't the first time he was abducting people. Maybe this was his role. He was the enforcer. He would make sure that the victim would be in the car. You know what I mean? So maybe he enforced him inside of the car, and the person driving the silver car was just the getaway driver. So I could see how all 3 people would be involved in Johnny's disappearance, to be honest.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I mean that part makes sense. And I agree with you. I mean that seems like the smart way to go. I mean, if you were going to do something horrible, would be teamwork. The one thing I don't get is I guess, or I guess what from my perspective, there would have to be 2 people in one vehicle, even if you couldn't see the second person. Like if that person's job was literally to just bear hug him and then get down to the bottom of the car, or I always think like a panel van or something like that would be what someone would want to use. I mean, you always see it in TV shows when agencies grab somebody off the street because there's no windows. It's you can kind of like subdue somebody inside a vehicle without anybody seeing. Whenever I think of like some of the vehicles we've heard of so far, I'm like, gosh, I mean, it is basically still nighttime, right? Because even though it's early morning, it's the sun isn't probably up at that point um, when the crime happens, because it's still only about 6 o'clock. So from that perspective, the limited visibility works. But yeah, I just keep on thinking it's kind of hard to grab a 13, like a teenage boy who's growing and getting stronger.
No,
It's
that's
kind of hard to
yeah.
do that and not get a little bit messed up, unless they didn't have tasers or anything back then, right? So
Yeah.
okay, so that's all right. So that's a little detour, but I did want to kind of talk about that a little bit. Okay, so here's the part that's sort of the big stunning thing. I think to me this is the most interesting and maybe controversial part of the whole case is that Noreen Gosch says that um, 2:30 a.m. one morning in March 1997. I don't think she has an actual definite day. She's awakened by a knock on her apartment door. In the intervening years, I think not even that long after Johnny disappeared, she got divorced from his father. So I guess she's just
John.
living.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So once again, I don't really know much more about that. I find it interesting. Maybe it's not that interesting because we've seen this in other cases where when a kid is kidnapped like this, it kind of breaks up the family. There's a lot of probably um, like finger pointing in the relationship, maybe. You know what I mean? It doesn't help. I don't think losing a kid this way helps your marriage. So yeah, that maybe isn't um, so shocking. But it also kind of leaves some room for thinking about other reasons
Of
why
course.
someone might disappear later. So yeah, just once again interesting. Okay, so what happens is this mystery person knocks at the door, and she says waiting outside was Johnny Gosch, now 27. So 27-year-old Johnny, she says, um, accompanied by an unidentified man. And she says that she immediately recognized her son. I guess the resemblance was there. He showed her the birthmark that only he had. And she said they talked for about an hour and a half. And this other guy, we don't really have a lot about who this other guy is, other than Johnny would look over to the other person for approval to speak. Now, that's interesting because you could take that a couple ways. I'll just take just to pause it right there. It doesn't always mean like literally, you know what I mean? Like I've seen couples do this, right? Where like if one person is maybe more submissive in a relationship, and I mean that just in a strictly like just who's the one you know talking a lot and making all the decisions and sort of thinks that they have the power in the relationship, and the other person maybe is not that person. Well, maybe that's what's going on here. Okay, so I don't know that this other person, I mean, why would this other person, if they had control of Johnny, even go see his mother? I don't know.
Yeah, it doesn't make any
Yeah.
sense. Yeah. Oh, dude, real quickly, just to give you a breather, because I'm kind of hoping that you don't run out of breath here, because you are covering these things real well. I wanted to add one other thing is that I did find it pretty suspicious how Johnny's mother would open, and she seemed like she's kind of paranoid as a person. She would open the door to like strangers at like 2:30 a.m. in the morning.
Yeah, that I mean, I don't think I would do it. I mean, I have, but like in an emergency.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, no, you're right. I mean, especially her by herself. So that part seems weird, but I mean, I'll like coin toss in that one. Either way,
Yeah. Yeah.
maybe she's desperate enough with. I mean, and I mean that like she's desperate enough to find her son, that maybe she'll just anytime someone comes, she'll talk to them. Um, but yeah, so he comes and he's saying, I guess now this is one of the things I actually copied and pasted at some of the Reddit commentary because it is interesting that like there's some there's some criticism, let's say, in the Reddit sphere that her version of this story keeps changing over time. Like new details keep on coming in. Supposedly, the second guy wasn't even mentioned the first time she ever talked about it. Um, so that's a little bit bothersome, is that there's still all this additional detail. Um, Now there's like the big question, which is like, hey, if he's an adult now, why isn't he like going public? Why isn't he freeing himself? I think there's some good reasons for why not. I don't think there's like several good reasons that are not necessarily all part of the same scenario. But that being said, yeah, it does seem a little weird. Like you would think somebody might pop up, and in fact, that has happened before. One of the stories I ran into. I mean, we've seen this, of course, in some of the cases we've covered, but I saw a case where it was like kind of really similar, like a kid that was kidnapped at like 12, and then this guy gets busted years later, and he's got these two kids, and like neither of them are his. And like the kid is actually returned, 4 years later or something to his parents, and he's like, okay, here we are. But like this is a different scenario, right?
Yeah,
This
of
is like
course.
this is a lifetime, and this is um like, yeah, you were my mom when I was 12, and now this is more than twice as long later. Um and
15
15
years.
years, right? Yeah, his life course has been completely altered. And think about this. Someone might say, well, what if he's living like some kind of horrible life? What if he's like a male prostitute? What if he's doing this? What if he's doing that? What if he's in an abusive relationship, or, some kind of weird relationship, but he's not completely like, doesn't have his own agency. He doesn't control himself. Maybe he's being controlled by somebody. Well, I would say that's true. It's interesting though, like one of the famous statistics is that when they talk to people about quality of life, you know what I mean? So when they go to like people all over the world, whether they're like a rice farmer in Vietnam, or like um, like a steel worker in Russia or something, wherever it is. And they say like, well, what's your quality of life? The fact is, like, even when they talk to like prostitutes in Calcutta and they ask them, they generally get back, I kind of like my life, because people get used to, not that it's a good life, not that it's a good life to be a prostitute in Calcutta, but that people tend to adjust and find like a new norm in how they're living,
Yeah.
assuming that it's not just outrageously violent and out of control. If there's some level of like, if someone's getting fed, they're getting sleep regularly, they're getting some basic needs met, they may have in fact what is on paper a terrible life, but they don't feel like that about it anymore.
Oh, makes
The
sense.
rest, yeah.
No, I would say that definitely makes sense to me, and I like how you're like definitely like not just throwing Noreen under the bus here, but I will say I personally strongly believe that this meeting didn't happen because I don't really find Noreen Gosch to be credible. She has, like I mean, police didn't apparently find this credible as well. So it is strange, but I want to say she announced this information apparently that Johnny visited her like 15 years after he disappeared randomly on one night in the morning in some court situation, if I'm not mistaken, right? Like where she could have potentially went to jail if she was lying, because she was apparently testifying in some other case, and from what I'm gathering, out of nowhere, she now releases this information that Johnny, who visited me back in 1997, 15 years after he disappeared, he was with a strange man, and he didn't let him talk that much. And he said he cannot tell me where he's is or he can't come home. And then she turned around and then she wrote a book about the book was named "Why Johnny Can't Come," and
Yeah,
she,
yeah.
and then she writes a book and she makes sales on the book. So do you see where I'm going with this? Like where it's like difficult for me to believe that this encounter did happen. In fact,
So, and I think what you're talking about, because I even saw there was like a TV show. It was funny. It was like I was when I was watching it, I was like, gosh, this must be something they only made for that local market, because this was like in the era of like the kind of 90s going into 2000s, grand era of mini talk shows on TV. And anyway, she's doing this talk show, like daytime talk show, and they have this whole thing where there's what you're talking about. I think that the court was that this is for this guy Paul Bonacci, right?
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
Paul Bonacci is another interesting character. Yeah, I think I've seen this show as well. Yeah.
yeah. And that, so okay, so this I'm glad you saw it, because I think maybe it's even worth it for the people listening to, like, if you just research this case, you put in Johnny's name or Noreen's name, the show will come up on YouTube. And it's interesting. It's interesting for a lot of reasons. One, it's a time capsule into television, like, 15 years ago, 16 years ago. It's funny how far we've come. Um, but it's also interesting because to me, the whole show is a little bit cringeworthy, because they did this whole thing where, like, she's never really actually ever talked to this guy, and like this whole thing that looks a little staged. It looks a little bit too good. You know what I mean? Like the pieces are fitting a little too perfectly, where like she has this private investigator guy who's claiming that, no, we never confirmed to this guy any of the stuff he told us was actually turning out to be true. And it was like really, really weird. Like the phrasing was weird, but then the guy was kind of like, he said, well, none of it was untrue, but then he kind of, it was kind of weird whether
Hmm.
what they were really saying that they had confirmed. But apparently they were trying to claim that they had confirmed something, and that this convict, who, like you said, she testified on behalf of and could have gotten in trouble for perjury had they been able to prove in court that she was lying to the court. Yeah, there's this whole thing with the guy himself was really weird. There's a whole, I mean, you can really go down the rabbit hole on this, because the only thing I was able to find on this guy specifically was that there's this whole other thing that happened in kind of Midwest politics with allegations of, like, once again, um, child prostitution rings, and like the big politics in the area, and like a big Republican donor, and like all this stuff that would happen. So this guy had supposedly been kind of like part of this whole alleged ring and gotten convicted, and it was sort of
Yeah.
the whole. Let me just shorten the whole
Of
thing.
of course.
Yeah.
Before you did that, I really quickly want to just step in because I also wanted to add a few things. I did watch that exact same thing, and I will play this in the post production, like the footage from that show. I don't really have it right now. It's of Paul Bonacci, right? Yeah, the talk show. I just want to say a really interesting thing about that talk show that like captured my attention, and I don't think you would have mentioned this, or maybe you would have forgotten it. So I want to say that apparently, okay, so the talk show is kind of, the setting of the talk show studio is kind of normal. There's an audience, whatever. There's like a main lady who's doing the talking, right? And there's Noreen and her private investigator sitting on the couch, right? And then the private investigator is telling the lady who's like the host of the show that the private investigator believes that Paul Bonacci knows what happened to Johnny Gosch, because when the private investigator talked to Johnny Gosch, talked to Paul Bonacci told the things to the investigator about Johnny that only a person who actually met Johnny would know. For instance, Paul Bonacci apparently told the investigator about scars on Johnny's body that were not publicly released, the information that was not publicly released, etc., etc. So I found it kind of interesting, but then at the very last second, they had this really weird phone call with Paul Bonacci from jail live on the show, and then they revealed something miraculous to Paul Bonacci. The private investigator said, "Everything you told me was the truth. You were not lying to me." And then the private investigator turned to the host and said, "I never told Paul Bonacci that what he was telling me was the truth. So he was telling me the answers and I was just writing them down, but I would not give him any feedback. And now, Paul Bonacci, live on this TV show, I'm telling you what you said is correct." And then Noreen was like, "Paul, after you get out of jail," because apparently Paul Bonacci was like, his sentence was like running out at that point, and he was a free man pretty soon after the show ended. Noreen was like, "I would like to talk to you and meet you after you become a free man," because allegedly Paul Bonacci was part of the kidnapping. Paul Bonacci was apparently forced by the other members of this child abuser cult or whatever, Nambla or whoever these people were. He was forced by them to kidnap Johnny and then perform sexual acts on Johnny. And then he regrets that apparently, and he was a free man. So he was the weird part about Paul Bonacci is that he was a free man, almost like he had like a week or two left on his like sentence, because he was in jail for some other sexual predatorial crimes against children, and he was a free man essentially. But then he was once again implicating himself in the Johnny Gosch case. So I don't really understood why Paul Bonacci, who had like 2 weeks left on his sentence, why would he implicate himself again and potentially face like a life sentence for that crap. Yeah, like it just screams like, to me, like I just keep thinking about like the book sales. Like this just screams like book sales. Let's sell some books, you know?
Yeah, I mean that Paul guy, that phone call you mentioned was like the most cringeworthy part of the whole production, where I was listening to him and I was like, first of all, he kept on talking about how, oh, I have multiple personality disorder, which like depending on depending on what I've read, might not even really be a thing. Um,
Yeah.
so that was part of it. I mean, it was just stuff like that where the guy, I listened to the guy and I kind of felt like the guy was full of crap. I felt like the guy was just saying what people wanted to hear. It was interesting though that he did imply someone could be full of crap and still say something true, right? Just like a stopped clock is right twice a day. So the one thing that was interesting, like you said, was that he was implying that there was like this sort of life cycle of being in these rings or these organizations where they would like, which I mean, could really, I mean, it sounded just like Oliver Twist or something, right? I mean, this has always been the case with criminal enterprises that recruit children, is there's like different levels of there's like a career path, and like, yeah, you start out doing one thing when you're the kid, and then when you're not the kid anymore, yeah, maybe you're in different parts of the organization where you're like acquiring new children for the business enterprise, or you're managing this or doing that or security. So it's implying that maybe some of these victims get turned into perpetrators, and then the idea that they could be held liable for what they've already done keeps them doing crimes, because they're like, well, I'm going to go to jail anyway, so this is the only life that I have now. um, there's a little bit of ignorance if someone was operating under that assumption, which doesn't mean it's wrong. I mean, sorry, this doesn't mean it's impossible. For sure, people operate under ignorance all the time, but it's interesting that, like, in reality, law enforcement, if they can get someone who's a pawn to, and I guess I say this for anybody who's listening to the show who might be in a difficult situation in an organization they're in. Um, let's just say that even goes for legal organizations, because even when it comes to like legit businesses, the U.S. government will pay you a bounty if you are working for a company that is doing something wrong, and you act as a witness, and you disclose to the state what's going on. Often you can actually even get a piece of the punitive damages. So it's interesting to think that somebody who is in a ring like this, if it really exists, could have the potential ability, in theory, to undermine the entire organization by just going to like the district attorneys and saying, I'll testify, just give me immunity," and often they
Yeah.
can get that immunity.
But like,
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
sorry. Yeah, dude, just go on, go on. I just wanted to like conclude the Paul Bonacci thing that clearly, in my opinion,
Oh yeah.
nothing really came out of like Paul Bonacci's statements. I believe.
Yeah, so it's like another one. I mean, if you're counting, okay, so far, but this is like this is like the third time now, right? The Noreen's popped up with like this big attention thing, and every time one of these things happens, if you think about it from a like an incentive point of view, right? I'm not saying she's lying or faking anything, but if you were somebody that needed attention to the thing you're talking about, or even for yourself, well, then a pattern like this, where new big things keep happening, keeps bringing the spotlight back to you. Okay, so we've already now seen 3 different times that the spotlight has come back to Noreen, and the fourth time is these pictures that are found. So, like I said,
Of course, dude. I'll just take over from here. Yeah, the pictures. Well, Glenn is definitely gonna have more information about the pictures, but apparently in 2006, someone left pictures. Where were they left? At the front door of Noreen Gosch, right? And these pictures were interesting, right?
yeah, they were. So there was. This is like I think another one of the points of controversy is, she reports once again. It's her. It's her reporting, right? I mean, I guess it would have to be her because it's not like the cops are watching her house or anything. But in 2006, she says that she finds photographs that someone's left at her front door. Some of which she posted on her website, so she has her own website. And it says there's a color photo that shows 3 boys. There's 2 photos, two main photos. So one is a color photo that shows 3 boys bound and gagged, um, like of about the right age. And then there's a black and white photo that appears to show a 12-year-old Johnny Gosch with his mouth gagged, hands and feet tied, and an apparent human brand on his shoulder. And then the third photo shows a man possibly dead who may have something tied around his neck. So this this thing is a major piece of controversy because on one hand, Noreen kind of like starts to tie this photo in, and then with all the stuff that people have been talking to her about over the years, Paul Bonacci, all these people, Sam Soda, she's kind of built like this literature. What was this I don't want to say story, I want to put this in a charitable way. She's built a body of literature and sort of a narrative in her mind that sort of tries to explain what's going on in the photos and trying to say, well, you see, this is like it was fascinating, but like irritating too when I listened to it because it was like, well, this is a snuff film, and see, the snuff film's always going to have like the dead guy, but then the children. There's like a whole thing where it's like, where do these rules come from? And I'm not even sure that what she's talking about is really a real thing. And depending on, I'm sure we'll get lots of comments saying, no, 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 this stuff's real. Okay, we know there's videos of people getting killed. We know there's probably been at some point some commercial production of that for some interested party. I don't know that it's really happening on the kind of scale that people.
I mean, we did a case about this.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
Dnipropetrovsk.
yeah, yeah. Those guys, but I mean, those guys weren't like. I mean, that they were. I mean, they were kind of a recent thing, and then they were. I mean, relatively recent because the snuff film thing, the snuff film rumors have been going on since film has been around. Um,
Exactly.
but then yeah, the Russian. I mean, like case in point, then someone goes and really does it, except it's like no one's paying them millions of dollars. You know what I mean? They're just like dipshits that got violent and recorded themselves doing it, and just were on a big spree. But then these plots, these kind of things are like the like no, 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 this is like this is big business in the black market. This is making organized crime all this money. I don't know. That's where it gets weird. Okay.
I
Anyway,
totally agree. I totally agree. Yes.
yeah, I mean, it gets.
Yes.
And
Yes.
this is us talking, right? Where we've talked about CIA conspiracies, and we still. I watched JFK the other day, and I was like, oh man, maybe we will have to do that show sometime.
Yeah.
But okay, getting back to this, yeah. So here's the interesting thing: is these photos though that she turns them in, and this guy Nelson Zalva, who worked at the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office, said that, or I mean, said that he actually saw the photos come through his office back in around 1979. There seems to be sort of some doubt about the exact, but it was somewhere in a time period before Johnny ever disappeared
Hmm.
that he had seen that the three, in fact, and then in fact for the photo of the 3 boys, that they'd actually tracked down some of the participants in that photo who had confirmed that while the whole thing still sounds incredibly creepy and weird, and I still think they should really look at the guy that essentially pay these kids with firecracker. I mean, you know what I mean? It couldn't have sounded worse. Almost a bit like he'd actually paid them in candy. You know what I mean? I mean, with fireworks, it doesn't sound better. Sounds like you're
That's
basically
funny.
giving. You know what I mean? When you, why didn't he pay him in Playboys? I mean, you know what I mean? It's just whatever it is a teenage boys crave. This guy was giving them to like. It was supposed to be some kind of contest to like see who could like get out of the ropes faster. I guess like escape faster kind of contest. Is that right? Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
from what I'm gathering, yeah, I'm not sure what kind of a contest it is, but yeah, apparently someone paid these kids in fireworks to get like tied up in his like room or something like that, and like and they would Jesus.
Yeah, you know what? Just I mean, you know, I know we're marked not for kids, but anybody that's listening, like just I mean, tell your kid it's never a good idea to have any adult suggest that you know, head for the hills. Yeah, so okay. So that was one of the photos, and then but that didn't but the photo of the other kid that looked like Johnny was never explained. Also Noreen, I guess there's some kind of like no surprise. Noreen thinks that Nelson Zalva is lying because apparently they can't find the paperwork or they can't. There's some kind of like back and forth about key pieces of like documentation for this claim being missing. Maybe the implication is that he's like helping cover up some bigger, let's say, ring of things. I don't know. I mean, she's claimed that there have been people this entire time that have been trying to scare her off of this like kind of crusade she's on, right? So maybe that's also part of like the, you know, everybody's against me grand conspiracy theory. But yeah, it's odd. I mean, it's funny because not funny, haha, but it's interesting that like we've run into this before just recently with another case that had like weird photos of people tied up and this all of a sudden this doesn't seem like this is such a like a rare thing,
Oh
oddly.
yeah, Tarika, no, Calacio, uh, Taro Calacio. What am I saying? Taro
Calico,
Calacios,
yeah,
Calco.
yeah, is that her name? Yeah, yeah, that was the one. Yeah, where yeah, once again, like weird photos. No, no, here's the one thing that bothers me about the photo of him tied up is like you and I said in those other photos. Yeah, he looks like he could be a high school senior, and apparently he in his Johnny in his photos tended to look older than he was.
Yeah,
So unfortunately, the photo, well, fortunately or unfortunately, the photo of this kid apparently doesn't really look. The kid looks his age.
I just want to quickly also step in with my information about this picture. From what I'm gathering, the Zalva person, the investigator who did see this picture run through his office in the late 70s, even before Johnny disappeared. Apparently, he was able to contact these two kids. You know what I mean? The only kid that was never identified, apparently, but this could be false, was the kid the most right in the most right position, right? So this kid was not allegedly found, but apparently, what I'm trying to say here is that if this picture was taken in '79 or like in the late '70s, then there's no way any of these kids are Johnny, because Johnny was still not missing up until '82. So if this was in '79, then Johnny wasn't missing for 3 more years, so this couldn't have possibly been Johnny. I guess the allegation here is that, is this the same picture that Zalva person seen? Because apparently there is no way to for sure uh, proof that this investigator had seen this same exact picture, right, from the '79. So the only thing that is left to discuss here is that, is his memory correct, right? Does he would he, because this came out in 2006, and 79 is like 27 years ago. So in 2006, would you remember exactly a picture that came through your like office? You know what I mean? Like 27 years later. I mean, what do you think, man?
Yeah, and that part seems weird to me. I mean, the one thing I was thinking of just looking at this photo, can't they just tell by the clothes? Because clothes are definitely different in 79 to 82. and like that, like that the shirt the kid's wearing in the middle.
Yeah.
I'm sure if someone just blew that up on Photoshop to figure out what that pattern is, it's probably pretty easy to tell. And then the football shirt the kid's wearing on the right, who's number 15 and what's that logo? Is that the Rams? I can't tell what it is, because that'll probably tell you. You know what I mean? Unless number 15 was the same dude. You know what I mean? Because number 15 might be a really famous guy in 79 and might be like a nobody in 82.
Or different teams in 82, you know what I mean? Something
Yeah.
like that. So,
Oh yeah, yeah. That's true too. Yeah, because teams definitely changed. Um, across years, and I mean we're talking about big consolidation years of the football. So
yeah.
yeah. Anyway, okay. So that's I just kind of wrapping up. I'm gonna wrap my little spiel about this because I've covered pretty much everything that I sort of set out to cover on that. The one thing that I would kind of look at is, and I think I hinted at this, is like when it comes to Noreen. I guess the what I always think about this is like, there's some famous quote. I always want to say it's Nietzsche, but maybe it's not. You ever heard that the when fighting monsters, the saying, the quote is, when fighting monsters, be careful that you do not also become one.
Not really.
Do you know that saying? You never heard that one before? Yeah, there's like
No.
a famous. I'll have to go look it up now. I'm probably there's somewhere there's a philosophy major screaming at their earphones. Yeah, so that the saying is, when fighting monsters, be careful that you don't also become a monster, right? So be careful that the things that you do to combat monsters don't also make you a monster and make you sort of lose perspective. And I
Yeah.
kind of start to wonder a little bit whether this poor woman, between the bad thing that happened, the awful thing that happened to her, the tragic thing that happened to her, and this sort of like, um, everybody uses this term a lot, echo chamber, but it like a non-political echo chamber, right? So anybody that's like really deep into like a certain world or a certain conspiracy theory or a certain topic or whatever it is, they're going to sort of get, you know what I mean? It's going to become more and more normal to think that maybe the most extreme points of view or opinions or theories are actually correct, when, like, you know what I mean, like 20 years ago Noreen might have had a totally different opinion about some of the stuff that's going on now. But yeah, now I really, I start to kind of wonder if she isn't sort of making a lot of fuss about things that may or may not happen, and then she gets attention, and her logic would be, well, if it ends up finding the truth, then I'm going to beg for forgiveness later. But until then, you can't prove that I'm lying.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. That actually is a really good way to describe Noreen, right? And her whole involvement. And I just would like to say you did an excellent job covering, I think, four. Yeah, the main in total four times. She was in the spotlight over the years, right? Unless you have anything else you want to add on Noreen, I think I still have like a few more things that I want to discuss, and then I guess we will just jump to the theories right after.
No, that's it for me.
All right, man. So the one thing that I wanted to discuss, because this case, is very Johnny's disappearance is very similar to Eugene Wade Martin's disappearance as well. So this is Eugene Martin, and he was also a paper boy in Des Moines, and he disappeared under very similar circumstances. The one question I have for us before we jump to the theories is that do we think that Eugene's disappearance and Johnny's disappearance are connected? So, really quickly, want to state some information about Eugene's disappearance as well. Um, the 12-year-old Johnny Gosch went missing in the early morning hours of September 5th, 1982, while he was delivering newspapers in his neighborhood in West Des Moines. Now, on August 12th, okay, so August and September, kind of similar month, right, in the same area, 1984, less than 2 years after Johnny disappeared. a 13-year-old newspaper carrier, Eugene Martin, vanished while preparing for his delivery route sometime between 5:30 a.m. and 6 a.m. So the same exact morning hours, very similar month, not 2 months, not 2 years later. Police have never been able to conclusively link the two disappearances, but they believe that both boys were abducted. Okay, now I want to read some similarities between the two abductions, and I want to jump to the map so that everyone would kind of have a better understanding. So this is the general neighborhood of Johnny Gosch's disappearance, and this is the neighborhood of Eugene Martin. Just as the crow fly, I want to quickly map the mileage here. So it's actually gonna be around 7.5. So like if you would take account of the actual roads, this would probably be around, I don't know, like 12 miles away. So around 12 miles away or something like that, the disappearance happened. So basically on the other side of Des Moines. Some similarities between the two cases were that they were about a year apart in age at the time of their disappearances. Both were paperboys, and they both worked for the same newspaper. Des Moines Register was the name of that newspaper. They vanished both on early Sunday mornings. They both went missing around the same time of year, August and September. In fact, Jean vanished only 3 weeks shy uh, of 2 year anniversary of Johnny's disappearance. So once again, I'm talking about Eugene, not Jean. The abductions took place roughly 8 miles apart. Okay, so apparently it's 8 miles. They occurred in quiet suburban low crime neighborhoods. Johnny's wagon and Eugene's bag, both filled with undelivered papers, were found abandoned on the street corners. There were no signs of struggle at either scene. The disappearances were unnoticed until 7 a.m. when customers began calling to ask where their newspapers were. There is nothing to indicate that either boy ran away from home. Eugene was going to turn 14 in less than a week and had plans to pick out a new bicycle with his dad, while Johnny was described as a happy, responsible, well-adjusted boy who took his newspaper route very seriously. It is very unusual for a runaway, especially one that young, to run away and successfully stay hidden for such a long period of time. There have been no verified signs of life since the day they both vanished, no activity on both of their social security numbers, no indication that they ever tried to get a job, buy a car, or anything like that. Neither of the boys have been ever found. Both boys were kidnapped the first time they went out to deliver papers alone, and both of their fathers served in the military. So, that's all I wanted to add. And your take, do you see the similarities? Do you think that these cases are connected?
And that's when I hear these big like descriptions and really detailed accusations and allegations from, let's say, Noreen and people she talked to. I get worried because on one hand, it kind of reminds me of a lot of the moral panics about like Satanism and things like that. Where, I mean, which isn't to say that I'm in favor of Satanism. What I'm saying is people started seeing like Satanism or like these different kinds of like conspiracies, whatever it is, everywhere. I mean, it becomes like a lot of other phenomena. But then you go and like I'm going to have to bring it back to Epstein once again, not from a political point of view because we're not a political show, but from an actual like true crime, like justice system perspective. What just I mean, just looking at the whole Epstein thing, whether how he died or but his life is I mean, how he died is fascinating. How he lived is even more fascinating, and the allegations that he was involved in, what seemed like some level of child trafficking, um, for use of what was out, alleged years ago. So a lot of these allegations that are going on in this thing, I mean, even that weird other case that happened, the Franklin, you know, ring that's been alleged, like
Mhm.
all that stuff starts to, you know what I mean? If you overlay what's being said there and you overlay it with the Epstein thing, like it's a lot of the same stuff, except the Epstein thing we know actually happened, right? So we have actual plane records and we have these pictures of these famous people with him, and we know that all these famous people, like, I mean, from I mean, politicians and not politicians have been like involved. We don't know exactly what's going on, but I think we're getting kind of we can, where there's smoke, there's fire, right? So you start to kind of wonder like what's going on. And now at the time of this recording, we have this Ghislaine Maxwell lady who is his, I guess his wife, kind of, is his domestic partner and co-conspirator, it looks like. So I guess what bothers me is at some level this could be very plausible. And then, when even when I was researching this, I always try to research a little bit more about the human trafficking topic because it comes up so much on our show. So for the US specifically, it was interesting because, on one hand, you'll find these articles, strangely, both from the Washington Post, kind of saying that there isn't like this whole huge problem with like underage trafficking. A lot of these numbers have been sort of either made up out of whole cloth or um, exaggerated. But then even a really small number is still a real victim for a really bad crime. You know what I mean? Like, let's one of these articles I think said, well, at the most, there's maybe only a couple thousand children involved in the prostitution and human trafficking industry in the United States. And I'm like, well, that's still like a high school.
Yeah.
That's like a high school full of kids that are like essentially sex slaves now. And then the fact that they're not going to stay kids forever, right? It's like that old awful joke. There's a new 18-year-old born every minute. Well, like, yeah, like they're not. So like that was the interesting thing, is apparently even in prostitution in general, apparently this article was claiming most prostitutes stay in max for like 4 to 6 years, and then they cycle out for whatever reason. Now maybe there's a little bit of like euphemism about what cycle out means, because cycle out might mean like die, right? Like OD, commit suicide, get killed by a client. I'm not sure what that means, but yeah, it's sort of disturbing to think about. Like, this problem could be a lot more widespread, and then it does seem like there is some sort of like glint of truth behind sort of some of these sort of bigger conspiracies about how it is possible that children, along with all other things that people do to entrap others, and things called like honey traps. So a honey trap is like when you entice somebody to compromise themselves, and then you record it and use it for blackmail against them, and that's like an old trick, right? um that's what's being alleged with like sort of the Epstein stuff on like the bigger level. It's not just that this guy's some kind of pervert trafficking children, is that there's like a goal behind it. So I guess that's what scares me, is the fact that we've seen all manner of other conspiracies that are signed off by taxpayer dollars for sort of, you know, this is for the greater good, right? So like, even like the Iran Contra stuff, or the war on drugs, or the stuff that was alleged with oh, I can't remember his name now, the guy for the guy that alleged all the CIA cocaine trafficking stuff in the
Oof, I don't
90s.
know that. Yeah.
Oh, you don't know him? Oh, that's Gary Webb. I think that's his name. Someone will tell us. Yeah, no, I mean that's always that's one of the biggest things they always talk about in sort of the inner cities when they talk about the war on drugs, is that that's sort of like when like one side of the argument says, well, why don't people take responsibility for yourselves, and then they say, well, because you were shipping in cocaine by the plane load, um, to give money to the CIA that they could then spend on projects that Congress couldn't monitor. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
So
no, it makes sense. It makes
yeah,
sense.
yeah. So
Yeah.
anyways, this is I know this is like a big long rant, but where I'm getting to is, like, for all the craziness and for all what might be lies in this, it's really fascinating to me to think that like there's some truth potentially somewhere in here, and that yeah, like while it does seem like the odds are that someone like Johnny, if they're kidnapped, are just going to be used by somebody and killed almost immediately. What if that isn't the case, and what if that is like,
Yeah.
you know, something that
But jumping back to the original
yeah.
question, man, do you think that
Whoops.
Eugene's case and Johnny's case are connected? I was kind of
Yeah.
wondering to get your take on
Yeah,
that.
I mean, I guess I'm saying 70% no, 30% yes.
Wow, that was a quick answer in comparison.
Sorry. I should
No,
I
it,
should have said that. I should have said that 10 minutes ago. Sorry,
yeah.
audience.
I don't really. Well, the police, I think, they kind of believe that this was connected, and some dude on Reddit who was like really, really actively investigating this. And you could read his Reddit posts; they're actually amazing. He does believe that Johnny's and Eugene's cases are connected, and at this point, I think it's a really good time for us to jump to the conclusion and to the essential theories of what may have happened. So, the way I really see it is. Let's start off with the one that's in my opinion most likely is the fact that Johnny got kidnapped. And apparently why I believe this way, well, I know that I believe this way, is because there's Johnny did not give any indications that he wanted to run away. So that's out of the question. He knew his job well and he was doing it very well for the last 11 months. He never missed a day's work and received awards for his very good work for the newspaper. So that's that. He really knew how to do his job well. And now he disappears under these strange circumstances. Um, Now we have a bunch of strange people around the neighborhood at the time of his disappearance. So I believe he was kidnapped. That's the most likely scenario, in my opinion. And we have three potential kidnappers, or they could all be in the same team. So I think firstly, I would just want to ask, do you think that this was a kidnapping, or do you think that maybe he potentially ran away, or maybe there was a potential accidental death happened, or maybe even a suicide? Like, I want to get your thoughts on. Do you believe that this was a kidnapping, or do you see any sort of chance for any other scenario other than a kidnapping?
Well, I'll say in terms of the odds, I mean, I when I was doing research in this case, I saw comparisons where kids had literally met, I think, every single one of the ones that you mentioned. So whether it was like they disappeared because they fell in a river, like I found one where they found a couple of missing teens in a car that they dragged the river for. They found them like years later. They're like, oh, there's those two missing teenagers we're looking for. I found one where a kid disappeared like Johnny, and then it turned out that he'd walked into the woods with his dad's gun and killed himself, and just no one ever found the body. Like for whatever reason, just like other cases where like people search all over the place and the body's right there, and nobody sees it. It wasn't until like 25 years later they're like, oh yeah, there's a body and that's the kid. But then I think in this case, no, I think he was kidnapped. I think it doesn't, like you said, there's none of these other indicators of like discontent, problems at school. I mean, to me, he's doing the opposite of somebody that would run away, except the one caveat is that him having a job means maybe he could put together some amount of money for if he had a secret plan to bail at some point for whatever reason.
Yeah, perhaps. Well, when you think about it, this was maybe an even a good time to bail because it was early morning hours. But then, I don't know. On the job, you probably wouldn't want to do that, especially for Johnny. Also, another thing I want to mention for the people that are listening to the show and are not actually watching the show. So on the map, we can see that where Johnny disappeared, it was in the middle of the neighborhood. Like, it's like very much a residential area. There are no woods, no huge water sources anywhere nearby, so it definitely looks like a kidnapping, and I feel very strongly that he was kidnapped. Now, The way it happened, we now have three suspects. So I still want to talk about the three suspects that could have kidnapped him. So let's remember that there was the man in the blue car, the man who was parked near the newspaper drop for 20 to 25 minutes before Johnny even approached the newspaper spot. He talked to Johnny twice. The car is described as a mid-sized 1979 to 1981 two-tone dark blue over light blue vehicle with Warren County, Iowa plates, a plush interior and no vinyl top. According to witnesses, the man himself appeared to be Caucasian or Hispanic, in his early to mid 40s and around 5'9", around 179 pounds, with black hair and an unshaven appearance. So we remember his story. Then we have the silver car driver. No physical description is available because he was not seen, and it isn't even clear whether this person is a man or a woman. This person's vehicle is described as a silver 1979 to 1982 Ford Fairmont, with a wide black stripe along the side. At the time, investigators seemed to place the most importance on this suspect since she or he was parked at 42nd and McCrount corner at the same exact time when Johnny was last seen, and at the same exact spot where Johnny's wagon filled with newspapers were found. And lastly, we have the strange man emerging from the shadows. This person was seen walking out of the shadows between two houses and towards Johnny as he approached the 42nd and McCrount Street corner, like at the spot where he was most likely kidnapped. From the understanding of the person who wrote this Reddit post that I'm reading right now, he was only seen by one witness, um, and this person is certain that this witness was the same friend Mike, who Johnny met at the paper drop. The only known physical detail is that he was taller than Johnny, but it doesn't say how taller. This is the suspect that we know least about, and according to one early article, the witness couldn't be entirely sure that he wasn't the same man who drove the blue car. So maybe we have two suspects, not three, but who knows, right? So let's just see that we have three suspects: mystery man, silver car driver, blue car mystery man. Who do you think is the most likely culprit, or all of them? I will say that um, since the blue car driver, I really can't tell if the blue car driver was connected to the case. He did seem odd. The mystery man coming out of the shadows, he's like a complete mystery. Doesn't really make much sense, like in the timeline that he even is here. Because let's remember, Johnny was around here when he emerged, and then his friend was somewhere here looking. Then he turned around, then Johnny parks here his wagon, a silver car appears, and then Johnny disappears. So, in my opinion, the silver car driver, him or her, is most likely the culprit, and in my opinion, there is absolutely no way of telling if the other two people were potentially involved. I will say that the person who was driving the silver car is the person responsible for the disappearance of Johnny Gosch. So that's where I'm gonna leave it at. And did your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I'm leaning pretty heavily towards some kind of conspiracy, like a small conspiracy, so not this big grand human trafficking ring that keeps being alleged, an ongoing cycle, but something that maybe seems more a little easier to wrap my mind around in terms of like not getting out or being discovered, which would be maybe two or three people with a similar, um, you know, criminal interest in something like this and kidnapping someone around his age, and then they orchestrate it. They orchestrated it pretty clumsy. I mean, there was just too much weird stuff going on that morning for it all to be a coincidence with these different strangers. So I think it was clearly some kind of orchestrated kidnapping. The only thing I'm not entirely sure about because I'm still, like I said, just my opinion. I still kind of wonder. I would like to know a little more about Johnny's father and his relationship with him, and whether there's any reason why, let's say, um, any reason why his parents, just being, the suspects that always are suspected whenever the people that are always suspected when a kidnapping or something else happens to a child, where a child goes missing. I do wonder if there would be any reason for either of them to have him go missing. Um, yeah, just food for thought on that. But that being said, I think that it probably was more like, this is an era where nobody had security cameras. If you weren't like an industrial warehouse or like a factory or something, or military base, you probably didn't have security cameras or a way to easily record footage or even look at it. Um, you could still get away with a lot, right? There still wasn't even really DNA testing yet, though evidence would be put away for later, for later
Yeah.
DNA testing. And like now we're doing DNA testing from cases back then. But yeah, I mean, if you think about it, there was a sort of like this period that was almost like if you were like some awful creepo, and we see this more and more, like these cases we cover, whether it was the Golden State Killer or a lot of other cases from this era. It seems like you could really get away with a lot, because just like forensic, between like just the the security wasn't there, people's guard was down. Like people weren't really thinking about this too much. It was like sort of a forbidden topic. Um, and I think things weren't as viral as they are now. This is maybe the beginning of things becoming really viral about this topic. I mean, they claim this case is like the stranger danger, um, like one of the stranger danger seeds, I guess, for
Yeah.
how we view it here in America, at least. So yeah, from that perspective, I think it's just a couple of guys. They did something with him, and then I think they probably killed him.
Yeah, I will agree. I think that is also, something that is very likely. And yeah, guys, I think we're gonna be signing out. Uh, Pretty long show today. I hope everyone will enjoy their holiday season. Dude, anything you want to mention before we sign out?
No, I mean, I think this is probably it for the year. So happy New Year, everybody. Happy holidays. Hope everyone's staying safe. Be careful. Stay alive for next year. But we'll be picking right back up.
Yeah, exactly, guys. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll join you on the next week's show, of course, which will be, I think, the first show of 2022. And hopefully, the next year is going to be very good for everyone here on the podcast and for the audience members as well. Thank you so much, and have a Merry Christmas or Happy New Year celebrations. We'll join you on the next week's episode. Stay safe and peace out.